Welcome back to the Washington State Real Estate Investing Podcast. If you're an investor looking for those niche markets that others might have missed or overlooked, then today's episode is for you. Or maybe you just want to learn more about markets you don't know much about. Then get ready for a great conversation about the Central Washington area around Wenatchee. In today's episode, I chat with Cole, the Wenatchee branch manager for Evergreen Home Loans, about the real estate in the greater Wenatchee area. From Leavenworth to Lake Chelan, we cover a region that might just be a hidden gem for investors at the moment. But first, an update on our own personal investment journey. As you know, in August, we closed on a property that we've been after for over a year in north central Spokane. It had a fire in it in 2018. And then over the last winter, some squatters moved in. Between the fire and the squatters, you can only imagine what shape the duplex was in. So to date, we've spent about $18,000 on just getting it down to studs and getting it cleaned out so we can start the process. We also were able to get the holes in the roof fixed. A shout out to Thomas at Prism Building out of Deer Park for being able to quickly get the roof fixed before the snow and winter hit. A link to his contacts in the show notes below. So we're slowly getting this project off the ground. Next up is getting a structural engineer on site to see just what we need to do structurally after the fire, and then hopefully create some plans. More to come on this adventure for sure. And that brings me to today's investor's highlight. As an investor, it's all about connections to people who can help you, support you, and your investment journey. Taking a few minutes to leave contractors a review, to reach out and say thank you, or give someone a shout out on a podcast can go a long way in building those relationships. Contractors and those in the construction business rely heavily on reviews of their work online. Taking time to leave a review, as silly as it sounds, can go a long way in supporting them and their business. It's a small gesture that might just get you a little better price or a quicker turnaround on your next project. And that brings me to today's great conversation. I've been trying to find someone in the greater Wenatchee area to come on the podcast and talk about that area of Washington from an investment standpoint. And thanks to Cole for picking up the call and shedding some light on this great area of our state. A great conversation that might just pique your interest in a new area of Washington to invest. Enjoy this great episode. And with that, on with the show. All right, welcome back to the Washington State Real Estate Investing Podcast. So excited to be here with Cole from Wenatchee today. Cole, thank you for being a guest on the podcast. Let's get started with just maybe a quick background introduction of how'd you get into the real estate space?
Yeah, no, it's just interesting. I was a broke college graduate that needed a job, and Wells Fargo Financial at the time was one of the entities that reached out and started doing what was called subprime lending at the time. So this is the very end of 2009 is when I got hired.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
So not really knowing what I was getting myself into, but I had a job, and, fast forward, 15 years essentially, or 14 years I've been in the industry, and my progress within the industry has changed quite a bit. But yeah, it started out at subprime lending, and now I'm currently a branch manager for Evergreen Home Loans, which is a direct lender. So I manage 3 different locations, and I've been fortunate to be a top 20 producer with Evergreen probably the last 6 years across the whole company, which is really cool. So
awesome. And you're located in Wenatchee, correct?
Yes. Yep.
Yeah. Do you want to talk a little bit about just the home loan market right now, kind of where things are for investors that are listening to this? What are you kind of seeing in the loan market space at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, so Wenatchee is unique, right? Wenatchee has, it's a desirable location, and one of the advantages of being in Wenatchee is we don't see the really high swings as maybe some of the metropolitan markets. But when COVID hit, Wenatchee and Chelan and Leavenworth, these areas surrounding Wenatchee, became very desirable locations to move your family to. It used to be primarily somebody buying their second home and maybe a future retirement home. And now the age demographic has shifted quite a bit.
Oh, wow.
Just like any other part of the state, though, supply and demand is a huge issue in the mortgage industry, along with where mortgage rates are at, right?
Sure.
But one of the things that's really advantageous for an investor, again, we can get into the loan specifics here in a little bit, but I think from a general perspective, rent prices are exceeding from a percentage standpoint what typically mortgage rate premium increases have changed to. So kind of clarifying that in a little bit better detail is if your goal is to invest, whether it's a short-term rental, and there's different strategies for short-term versus long-term, as long as you sit with a loan officer that adequately prepares your options so that you can determine if you cash flow or not, that's the primary measurement. But as far as locations in our area, there's tons of great spots, and it's a huge destination for investors. And I'm fortunate that I get to work with, some permanent investors. So in our world, we call them professional investors, right? Somebody that's investing as a professional means to supplement their income, or somebody that's looking at just having one or two properties. Wenatchee is a desirable location for that because both short-term and long-term rental options are viable. So not unique to our market, but an amazing part of our market is you've got opportunities for both depending on what your motivation is.
Are there actual loan, and I don't know so maybe there isn't, but are there actual loans out there for short-term rental properties? I find it really difficult. I mean, I haven't done a lot of digging into them, but I know it's just one of these spaces that it seems to be, I don't know if there's actual loan products out there that are looking specifically towards short-term rental kind of investments.
Not really, not without going off the beaten path, but there's strategy with everything, right? If you're working with an experienced loan officer that has, a company that has a lot of different options, you're really looking at two primary paths down the highway. You're looking at your conforming options. So conforming would be your standard Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac,
right?
FHA, whatever the options we want to look at. But those are relegated to typically long-term rents to qualify.
Right.
Airbnb and Vrbo and things like that are going to be really difficult without a prior history of doing that. So from a conventional standpoint, you typically need to have at least a year of rents received on any sort of short-term rental for an underwriter to basically qualify that, right? We have to see it on tax returns, essentially, is what your issue. And some banks are going to say 2 years, right? But 1 year you can start to get around it. Long-term rentals are a little bit different because we can go off of market analysis. We can go off of existing lease agreements or potentially a future lease agreement. So you have a much more breadth of options to qualify somebody when it's a long-term rental, which, depending on your strategy, could be something that you do short-term, right? A 6-month lease or a 1-year lease, and then at some point then convert that to short-term. You just have to have a plan going in, right? And then again, you don't want to bend compliantly ever the rules that go in with, especially if you're working with somebody experienced. But there are ways to kind of get you into that if you're a more short-term rents inclined. Yeah. One exception. So the conforming channel, it's really specific. You have to meet a certain set of criteria. Right. You can get into the non-conforming realm. So non-conforming loans are going to be broker loans for a lot of institutions that are niche products. And one of those that's most common is what's called DSCR, which is debt service coverage ratio. That is a form of it can be a cross-collateral loan, but it's primarily an investment-driven loan to qualify somebody and potentially use different calculation methods to basically get somebody into a home, right? So that's the hardest thing with investment property is how do you offset that new mortgage payment? Well, on the conforming channel, you have some ways to do that. Rent market analysis, or really a lease agreement. We can use certain percentages of those depending on how long you've been an investor. DSCR would be that other bucket that you could potentially get into. But again, there's some nuance to that. It's typically not designed for short-term rents. So you're really looking at just a different calculation method to get somebody going on their portfolio and then looking to convert or expand that as they go. Unless they can qualify for the property without using any rents, then by all means, do it as a short-term rental. It's
Sure.
only if we need an offset to their debt to income ratio that we need to look at potentially other creative avenues.
So is there even an option, and I'm thinking because I'm thinking specifically at Leavenworth, and I know Wenatchee is very much the same way, but I'm going to guess Leavenworth, there's a lot of short-term rentals. It's still a place with very high destination. Here in the state of Washington, a lot of local tourists that I know, like even all my friends love to go to Leavenworth for a weekend, type of stuff. We've got not only and I think Leavenworth was just ranked like one of the top 10 small cities in America or something. So, there's going to be more tourism coming in. So I can see a lot of investors be thinking about, okay, what does it look like to invest in a place, say like Leavenworth, and then the offshoots of that, Wenatchee. So I'm wondering, is it one of those things where I could go in and if I could buy the property with cash, short-term rent it for a couple years and then be able to show that income as a way to do even a debt service coverage, right?
Yeah.
To then take my money back out, right? So I would have to be in it. I would think as an investor, okay, I'm going to be all cash in for 2 years before I'm going to go and refinance back out because I need to be able to show, that there is income coming in and there's some kind of average stability that we can take based on 2 years of income.
And that's 100% what it is, right? So anytime there's variable income in the lending space, what underwriters and banks and lenders are looking for is stability, right? We're looking for some sort of calculation method. Well, really the only way you can do that is tax returns, right? Sure. To kind of see, and again, there's nuance to that, right? If I'm picking on you, if you own a bunch of properties and some of them are short-term rentals, there are sometimes calculation methods that we can use and bring over to a new transaction, but those are nuanced, right? So really, if somebody was cash solvent, picked up a property, what they'd want to do is probably sit with the lender, strategize out, okay, what are you guys going to look for in a year? So for us, we at least want 1 year. Some places are going to require 2. But that's where I would sit with somebody like you and go, okay, what's the ultimate plan for this property, right? Is it long-term, not from a rental standpoint, but from an ownership standpoint?
Right, from a hold standpoint, yeah.
From a hold standpoint, yeah. So we would look at that. And then I would basically try to help whatever client I'm looking at going, okay, what's our best path to access this collateral going forward? Is it as simple as a cash out refinance? Well, there's restrictions to that of how much money you can leverage. Is it a home equity line of credit? Well, maybe. It depends on what Prime's doing and what you're going to do with those funds. But that's a logical way to kind of get into something and then tap into it. Probably a minimum of a year of filed returns. But then you open up the CPA aspect of, well, how much income do I need to show? Do I want to write everything off for a tax benefit, or do I need to show some additional cash flow so that it doesn't hinder my ability to either refinance that property or use that money to then leverage another property, right? So the ultimate goal is to keep your money in a spot that you can keep making money with it.
Right.
But from a loan standpoint, you got to sit with an experienced loan officer to go, okay, here's how we want to work this out, and here's how much income we need to really show so that it doesn't hinder your, B, C, and D, right? If you're going down the path of it. So anyways, there's just strategy involved with that, but that would be a good plan. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Does this stuff excite you? Like coming up with these solutions, like sitting down and saying like, there's this, we could do it this way, we could do it that way. You have to figure out this and that. Like, to me, that's part of what I love about real estate. And what I love talking to people like you is like, it's just this, okay, well, you can do it this way. Or if we can show that we made money over here, or this is how much money you have to have, or your debt to cover ratio has to be 1.25. What does that mean?
Yeah.
I just love trying to figure that stuff. I can only imagine from a loan officer side, it gets to be a little bit fun to kind of be unique and support people and trying to figure out what's the best way that they can leverage, and leverage their money and properties for the best for them and whatever the standpoint.
Yeah, I think honestly, and you touch on it, I think it really just depends on the individual and why you're in the industry, right? To me, there's 2 buckets. You're either transactionally based or you're relationship based. Well, I've always felt, and my company is a big proponent of this, is we're a relationship lender. We want to build a relationship out. And that's the part I enjoy the most, is the relationship, but then also the problem solving. So they kind of go together. But the only way you can put yourself out there is by trying these different styles of loans. And really, I think at one point last year, I think I'd done 40 unique products as part of Evergreen,
Wow.
out of 100 plus loans that I closed.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
So being experienced in sitting with somebody that likes to problem solve and big think, that's less transactional. That's more relationship, right? I've
Sure.
always had that stance where I don't want to help you do one loan. I want to help you do 5, right? Well,
Yeah.
how do I do that? It's that strategy of looking past the first transaction, right? I want to set, specifically with investors, you want to set them up for what their goals are for their portfolio, right? If it's to hold 5 properties, well, there's strategy in doing 5 properties, right? Well, now if it's 15, okay, conventional loans become really tricky after a certain amount of financed properties, but there are other nuanced options that you can get into, but you still have to do that long form planning of how do I set myself up for the next thing so that I do pass my debt to income ratio or my DSCR coverage ratio, because there's different percentages to that. There's 1 1/4, there's 1, there's no ratio programs, right? Well, how does that flow into my individual, financial plan? Well, that's where a good lender is going to sit with you, or a good loan officer is going to go, okay, you're good here, but to get you down here, we need to talk to your CPA. Let's make sure that we're setting you up. So anyways, that the problem solving part is really fun, but I think it's more of just planning ahead of what you're trying to do and really setting realistic expectations on if they're doable or not.
I love that idea of like, can you find a loan officer who is more relational versus before translational? I love that. I think that's such a great way to think about it as you are going out and meeting with different loan officers, as most investors do over the course of their time. That's a great way to look at it. Let's talk a little bit about your market specifically there in Wenatchee, in the greater Wenatchee area. You talked about after the pandemic, you've seen a switch from a little bit of a switch from this idea that this was going to be my second home, or maybe in the summertime I get to go out on the Columbia River, or I've got a cabin up in Leavenworth. And after the pandemic, you were seeing this shift to people moving there, maybe working remotely, or finding new jobs in the area. Can you talk a little bit about maybe the real estate market kind of as it is at the moment? What are some of the numbers or things that you're seeing there?
Yeah, I mean, so our area is unique in that supply and demand, just like other areas, is really, really difficult. But as rates have stayed in this kind of quote unquote higher environment, it has made it more of what I would consider a buyer's market. So it's a really good time to jump in, even though rates may be a little bit scary. The one thing I tell everybody I talk to, Jeff, is you can never control the market. You can't control what rates are doing. We can predict and kind of guesstimate where the market's going to go based off of historical data. But at the end of the day, you have to, when you look at a loan, whether it's an investment loan or a primary purchase or whatever, does it fit into your budget, right? And are you okay with it? Psychologically and financially, are you comfortable with it, right? You can't predict what's going to happen interest rate wise, though we do think, at some point next year, things are going to, move around. So it becomes much more about planning in our area. But specifically, what I'm getting at is as soon as rates start to dip, we are going to be in a competing offer situation again because inventory is so challenged. So if you look at what our progression has been, at least in Wenatchee or the greater Wenatchee area, so Chelan, Leavenworth, Wenatchee, is home values are appreciating still, right? So even though rates have started to clip above 8%, investment rates are going to be slightly higher than that. What you're finding is about an 18% appreciation factor over the next 5 years is the prediction.
Wow.
In our market currently, somewhere between 2 and 4%, even what you would consider a pullback year, right?
Right.
So the biggest thing is really just inventory is the challenge. But as far as interest in our area, it's probably at an all-time high for a variety of different reasons. Specifically, from an investment standpoint, not only does Wenatchee, we have Mission Ridge, which is the ski resort. So you get the short-term interest that, related to that, fishing, hunting, all of that. Now you got destinations such as Leavenworth, so Bavarian tourist area, which generates a ton of interest. And we're in Oktoberfest, right? These constant things, right?
Yeah.
But really Chelan then too, for the summer months, you have Lake Chelan. You have these different destinations that are there. But from a numerical standpoint, we have more interest in the properties that are there. So trying to stay in front of that is really good. And at some point that's going to teeter, right? As soon as rates drop, you're going to see 10 to 12 to 14 competing offers again. But there's nothing analytically out there yet to show that our area is slowing down, which is why home values are continuing to go up, right? It's kind of business school 101, supply and demand. So from an investor standpoint, you've got an appreciating market. You have a rental market that's exceeding percentage-wise than what mortgage rates are doing. It's kind of a hot spot when you think about it from that perspective, but it's still got to make sense for your individual budget portfolio. But there's no signs of that slowing down, at least knock on wood. There's nothing we can see analytically that shows that.
Yeah. And I would strongly encourage any investors who are listening to this podcast, if you haven't been out to, the Leavenworth, Wenatchee, Chelan area, it is a beautiful, beautiful area. And to your point, I don't see it slowing down. I just, from everything that I see and every time I'm out there, I'm to the point where I'm always talking to my wife saying, I think we really should invest somewhere in the Wenatchee area or, in one of those areas. Cause I just think, I really do think it is it's an incredible area that is yet to see its peak. Everything that, to your point, everything that's happening in Leavenworth, and Leavenworth now being on the list of top 10 little cities. And, we go to Leavenworth, spend the night, and then go skiing up at Stevens. And then we come into Wenatchee, spend the night and go up and ski at Mission Ridge. And we just do a little road tour. Summertime, we're at least in Lake Chelan once, whether it's fishing or we're just hanging out up at Lake Chelan. So it just is an incredible area. And I do think that, it's great to be able to talk to you, to just get it on investors' radar of what is happening in these different areas of our state. And I think this area of our state has just so much opportunity from an investor standpoint for both long-term and short-term rentals. I just think it's a fantastic area.
It is. And I think that there's other metrics, Jeff, that people kind of forget, but cost of power and utilities in our area is extremely cheap compared to other areas of the state, right? Because we have the dam, we got hydropower. So when you start looking at those miscellaneous expenses that come along with home ownership or as an investor, there's other avenues too that most people don't pencil in initially, that as you start to pencil in, go, holy cow, this is significantly cheaper. And then you start looking at what the future looks like. We have 900 to 1,200 lots allocated for new construction, right? So we see the demand. I mean, our contractors and people here see that the demand is still high. So how do you leverage that? Well, existing homeowners probably aren't going to sell until rates start to mitigate a change, which we think is the next 12 to 18 months. But then you look at what's happening new in our area, 900 to 1,200 lots in development. Can you get in front of that, right? Not that I'm advocating somebody pull the trigger before they're ready, but there is opportunity if you were to start doing the research now in an area like Wenatchee, Chelan, or Leavenworth, that if you can get in and make the connections and start doing the math, that it's going to potentially pencil out for a lot of people. And that's why investors are still purchasing right now, even in the higher rate environment, is that cash flow is still making a ton of sense for most people. And then you pair it with an area that's appreciating and that has a lot of opportunity for new development. It's a good window, right? But again, it's not everybody. You got to do the research. But if you talk to the right people and you visit yourself, you can see it. It's pretty clear. And there's a reason why we're actually hitting little charts and demographics of things to pay attention to. It's because of the conversation we're having right now.
Yeah. Oh, I love that, Cole. Thank you so much for your insight. If people wanted to reach out and talk with you more or see what maybe loan products that you can offer, what's a good way for people to reach out and contact you?
Yeah, so I'll just kind of touch on that quick. So Evergreen Home Loans is the company I work for. We're based out of Bellevue, Washington, privately owned for about 40 years. We're licensed in 10 states. I'm licensed in all of Washington state. So anywhere in Washington, I can do a loan. And obviously I have connections in our other states that we're licensed at. But my website, if somebody, and this sounds corny, but if you Google Cole Grode at Evergreen Home Loans, my website will pop up. I do have an Instagram that I don't manage. I hired somebody because I'm terrible at social media, but it's Team Grode on Instagram. My information will pop up, but really my website is the best way to get a hold of me. And then I don't know if I should, my cell phone's public, but a lot of people will reach out. But yeah, all that information is on my website too, but somebody could reach out via email, text message, phone call. All of that is fair game for me.
Awesome. And we'll make sure all of that is in the show notes as well, so people can just scroll down underneath this video or audio and you get all that information real quick. So, well, Cole, thank you so much for hanging out with me today. I know you're a busy guy, so I just wanted to touch base and thank you for kind of talking about this region of Washington, because it's been really hard for me to find someone to talk specifically about that region. And like I said, every time I drive through it, I'm like, I've got to find somebody who knows more about this region than I do, because I just have a feeling this is an incredible place that I want to highlight in our state. So appreciate you giving up your time today.
Honestly, and thank you for bringing some attention to a smaller market like ours, right? I mean, we always joke around that we're kind of the redheaded stepchild of the state in some respects, but it really is a great market. I am slightly biased, but from an investment standpoint, I've been fortunate to work with a lot of professional investors across the state, and they have parts of their portfolio here. So if other people are doing it, there's obviously reasons for that. But no, thank you for highlighting Wenatchee in our area. And there's, outside of myself, there's some great people here and great loan officers and people that are willing to help anybody. This isn't a self plug for myself, right? It's really our community. There's some great people here as well too. So
yeah. Awesome. Thank you, Cole. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.